Every year, governments celebrate GDP growth like it's Christmas morning. Politicians smile for cameras, economists nod approvingly, and stock markets surge. But there's a dirty secret hiding behind those numbers, a lie so fundamental that it's reshaping our entire civilization. When the Exxon Valdez oil spill devastated Alaska's coastline in 1989, it caused over $300 million in economic losses to fishing alone. Entire communities lost their livelihoods overnight. Yet the billions spent on cleanup counted as economic growth. When Hurricane Katrina destroyed New Orleans in 2005, it caused $125 billion in damages and doubled unemployment. Families lost everything. But again, the massive reconstruction spending boosted GDP numbers. In our system, destruction and recovery both count as success. And that's just the beginning of the lie. Right now, the global economy is worth approximately $110 trillion, according to the International Monetary Fund. That's the largest figure in human history. We've never been richer as a species. Yet paradoxically, most people feel poorer, more stressed, and more insecure than ever before. Mental health crises plague developed nations. Young people can't afford homes. Climate anxiety keeps millions awake at night. Suicide rates in the world's richest countries continue climbing. So what's going on? How can we be simultaneously the wealthiest and most miserable generation in history? The answer lies in understanding what we're actually measuring and what we're completely ignoring. Gross domestic product, or GDP, was developed by economist Simon Kuznets in the 1930s to help the US government measure production during the Great Depression. It was a wartime tool designed to track how much stuff a country could produce to fight fascism. But here's what Kuznets himself warned: GDP doesn't measure well-being, fairness, or sustainability. It measures transactions. If money changes hands, GDP goes up. That means oil spill cleanups, car accident repairs, even cancer treatments all add to growth, regardless of whether they make society better off. Kuznets explicitly cautioned against using GDP as a measure of national welfare. He knew it was incomplete. But politicians loved having a single number to point to. Economists loved having something simple to model. And so a wartime emergency measure became the holy grail of modern civilization. Think about the absurdity. A country where everyone gets cancer would have higher GDP than one where everyone stays healthy, because treating cancer generates more economic activity than preventing it. A society where marriages collapse would outperform one with stable families, because divorce lawyers, separate housing, and custody battles all boost GDP. A nation that clear-cuts its forests would show more growth than one that preserves them, because chainsaws and lumber sales count, but standing trees don't. This isn't just a technical detail. It means entire economies can look healthy while their people suffer. After Hurricane Katrina, the storm caused massive immediate losses. 95,000 people lost jobs in New Orleans alone, representing $2.9 billion in lost wages. Families were scattered across the country. Communities that had existed for generations were wiped out. The psychological trauma lasted for decades. But the $120 billion spent on reconstruction over the following years showed up as economic growth in GDP statistics. To economists, that was recovery. To the people who lived through it, it was survival. Consider Japan's experience after the 2011 tsunami and Fukushima disaster. The immediate devastation killed over 15,000 people and displaced hundreds of thousands more. Entire towns were erased from the map. Yet the massive reconstruction efforts that followed contributed significantly to Japan's GDP growth in subsequent years. Or look at the opioid crisis in America. Over 500,000 people have died from drug overdoses since 1999. Families have been destroyed. Communities have been hollowed out. But from a GDP perspective, the crisis has been economically beneficial, generating billions in pharmaceutical sales, addiction treatment services, funeral costs, and law enforcement spending. The more we suffer, the more the economy grows. The GDP obsession benefits corporations, politicians, and financial markets, because growth at any cost creates winners at the top, even when inequality soars. According to the World Inequality Database, since 1980, the global economy has more than tripled in size. That sounds like universal prosperity, right? Wrong. The share of income going to the bottom 50% of earners has declined in most developed countries, while the top 1% has captured an increasingly large share of total wealth. In the United States, the richest 1% now control more wealth than the entire bottom 50% combined. This isn't an accident, it's a feature of GDP-focused policy. When governments prioritize growth over distribution, they create systems that reward capital over labor, speculation over production, and extraction over sustainability. Consider the tech boom. Companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook have added trillions to global GDP, but they've also created winner-take-all markets, eliminated millions of traditional jobs, and concentrated unprecedented power in the hands of a few billionaires. Meanwhile, essential workers, teachers, nurses, caregivers, whose contributions to human well-being are immeasurable, remain undervalued because their work doesn't generate the kind of financial transactions that boost GDP. A hedge fund manager who moves money around can add millions to GDP in a single day. A mother raising children adds nothing, according to our metrics. A forest standing untouched contributes zero. The same forest cut down and sold contributes thousands. Perhaps nowhere is GDP's failure more dangerous than in environmental accounting. Our current system treats the natural world as either worthless or valuable, only when destroyed. The Amazon rainforest, which produces 20% of the world's oxygen and regulates global climate patterns, contributes virtually nothing to Brazil's GDP while standing. But when it's burned for cattle ranching or soy farming, it generates significant economic activity. This accounting madness means that countries can boost their GDP by depleting their natural capital, essentially selling their children's future for today's growth numbers. China's rapid GDP growth over the past 4 decades came at an enormous environmental cost. The country now has 16 of the world's 20 most polluted cities. Air pollution causes over 1 million premature deaths annually. Water contamination affects hundreds of millions of people, but all the industrial activity that created this pollution counted as economic success. The true cost, healthcare expenses, lost productivity, environmental cleanup, reduced life expectancy, either doesn't show up in GDP at all, or actually boosts it when money is spent addressing the problems. Climate change itself reveals GDP's fundamental flaw. The fossil fuel industry has generated trillions in GDP over the past century. But the climate damage it's caused, extreme weather, rising sea levels, agricultural disruption, will cost far more to address. Yet our accounting system counts the profits, but ignores the costs until they're paid. The human cost of GDP obsession extends deep into our psychological well-being. Countries with the highest GDP per capita often have the highest rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. South Korea, despite its remarkable economic growth, has one of the world's highest suicide rates. Japan, the world's 3rd largest economy, has a word, karoshi, for death from overwork. The United States, with the world's largest economy, has seen life expectancy decline in recent years due to deaths of despair, suicide, drug overdose, and alcohol-related deaths. Meanwhile, countries that prioritize well-being over pure economic growth often report higher levels of happiness and life satisfaction. Denmark consistently ranks among the world's happiest countries, despite having lower GDP per capita than the United States. The pursuit of endless growth has created a culture of perpetual dissatisfaction. We're told that more consumption equals more happiness, that economic expansion equals human progress. But the evidence suggests the opposite. Beyond meeting basic needs, additional GDP growth often comes at the expense of the very things that make life meaningful: community, relationships, leisure, connection with nature. But it doesn't have to be this way. Some countries are already abandoning GDP as their guiding star, and the results are encouraging. Since 1972, Bhutan has used gross national happiness as its primary development indicator. The country measures progress across 9 domains: psychological well-being, health, education, cultural diversity, time use, good governance, community vitality, ecological diversity, and living standards. The result? Bhutan is carbon negative, has universal health care, and consistently ranks high in happiness surveys despite modest GDP. In 2019, New Zealand became the first country to introduce a well-being budget, prioritizing mental health, child poverty reduction, and environmental sustainability over pure economic growth. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern argued that GDP alone does not guarantee improvement to our living standards or well-being. Iceland and Wales have followed similar approaches. Iceland's government now measures success through 39 indicators, including trust in institutions, connection to nature, and work-life balance. Wales has adopted the Well-Being of Future Generations Act, requiring all public bodies to consider the long-term impact of their decisions. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, adopted in 2015 with a target date of 2030, explicitly call for countries to measure progress beyond GDP. The UN's Human Development Index already incorporates health, education, and income equality. The OECD's Better Life Index measures 11 dimensions of well-being. Even the World Bank now publishes wealth accounting that includes natural and human capital, not just financial assets. These aren't just feel-good initiatives, they're practical policy frameworks that are already improving lives. GDP has dominated economic thinking for nearly a century, but the evidence is clear. Measuring only financial transactions while ignoring well-being, equality, and environmental health gives us a dangerously incomplete picture. The $110 trillion global economy isn't proof of universal prosperity. It's proof that we're measuring the wrong things. We've optimized for the wrong goals and gotten exactly what we measured: more transactions, regardless of their impact on human flourishing. The real question isn't whether we can afford to change our metrics, it's whether we can afford not to. Climate change, inequality, mental health crises, and social fragmentation are all symptoms of a system that values growth over well-being, quantity over quality, speed over sustainability. But change is possible every time we choose community over consumption, sustainability over short-term profit, well-being over wealth accumulation. We're voting for a different kind of future. The metrics we choose shape the world we create. For too long, we've let a single number, GDP, define human progress. It's time to measure what truly matters. When we start measuring well-being, equality, sustainability, and genuine human flourishing, what kind of world will we choose to build? The answer to that question will determine not just our economic future, but the future of human civilization itself.